when I got drafted, I was always super keen to come back and live in Melbourne. I come from a very close family and have some good friends here, and really love Melbourne. So in my own mind, I was always going to come back. After I signed my last contract, I probably thought it was unlikely that I'd sign another one, or if I signed another one, then I'd stay till after footy, because I was going to come out at 24. If you sign another one, then you're 27. It would hardly seem worth coming back to Melbourne for a few years of footy. So I sort of went into it with that mindset, without a concrete this will be it. And then I guess, probably a year out, I thought, yeah, this is pretty likely this will be it.
So when you went to Whoosh and said, John, I'm going home to Melbourne, what was his response?
It was an awkward one. I mean, before I took on the captaincy, I said to the club, look, it's highly likely I won't be here in 2 years' time. Or was it 2 years' time? Yeah, in 2 years' time. So I wanted to make that really clear, because I didn't want to, particularly, I may have changed the circumstance a little bit, but up until then, you signed on for captain, you were there for life. So I wanted to make that very clear, that by doing this, I couldn't commit to that. So I think that would have given them some inclination that this was a possibility. But look, I think they were all still quite surprised when they got that decision. And Whoosh, look, I got along really well with him and loved playing for him. And I was just honest with him. And Whoosh is the most honest bloke in Australia, and I think he appreciated that. And he just accepted it. He didn't try and talk me out of it. He thanked me for what I'd done for the club. And it was probably about a 15-minute chat, and then we went our separate ways.
After the break, Chris tells us why he decided to join the Blues and talks about that notorious red dress. You would have had, when you announced that you were coming home, there would have been 10 Victorian clubs in a queue. You settled on the Blues after listening to representations from 4 Melbourne clubs. Why Carlton?
It was a combination of things. Probably they had a really good young list, which a lot of it was the result of having so many early picks. They could do the deal. They could manage to get an attractive enough offer up for West Coast to make the trade. I thought they had really sound management and coaching staff under Greg Swan and Brett Ratton, and I guess with Dick Pratt's involvement as well, I was confident that the financial viability of the club was going to be such they were going to be able to spend enough money in their footy department to build a successful club.
Your first year at Carlton, you won the best and fairest, but a lot of observers had the view that you were carrying that chronic groin problem again. How difficult was it in 2008?
It was a pretty challenging year, personally. I guess I had huge expectations from outside of the club. The club was very diligent in not having those same expectations as well, but you can't help but feel those expectations. So it was a challenge. I was doing a heap of stuff outside the club to get my groins right, which was incredibly busy more than anything else. You're sort of doing everything you need to do at the club, and then exploring any sort of avenues outside the club to try and assist the problem.
Did you need to actually literally learn to walk in a different way? Is that true?
Yeah. So by the end of 2007, my body was just shot to pieces, and I'd walk with my feet flayed out, and one hip higher than another. It was a disaster. So there was huge number of things that needed to be worked on, and they just take an incredibly long time to fix all those things. So yeah, look, 2008 was a tough year, but also an exciting one to be settling into a new club and playing with a new group of players. But I guess from a personal level, having a full pre-season under my belt, 2009's been a bit of a smoother year.
When Fev is bad Fev, do you get involved or do you leave that to the coaches?
Look, a bit of both. I get involved a bit. but depending on what the issue is and what it is, sometimes it gets dealt with by Rats and Swanee, and sometimes it gets dealt with by me.
Does he frustrate you?
Look, not really. I mean, Fev's body language is such, it's a bit like Richo. He's, they wear their heart on their sleeve, and, as soon as you look at him, you can see what sort of day he's having just by his body language. And I think he gets ridden pretty hard for that. But look, by and large, the main conversations I have with Fev are about his body language being up, because when it is, it gives Mitch Robinson and Chris Judd and our young players, it fills them with confidence. I mean, it even fills me with confidence, because I know when his body language is up and he's playing that team role, that our forward line structure is going to work perfectly, and when that happens, we're a very hard side to beat.
You won the Carlton Best and Fairest in 2008. Was Fev stiff? Were you lucky to win the BNF?
Probably. I think one of the things with all individual awards, it gets touched on a lot in the Brownlow, but when you're a midfielder, every week you have the opportunity to play well, because the ball's always going to be in your area for a fair part of the game. When you're a tall forward or a tall back, particularly at the full forward or full back line, there's going to be weeks where you just don't have the opportunity to play well. And then you add onto that the weeks where you don't play well, it becomes pretty hard to win individual awards. So, Fev fits in that category. And look, he had a super year last year and was probably, was probably unlucky, and he'll be more than happy to tell you that if you ask him.
He has told me that. I think he could have written that question. The Brownlow, is that, it's obviously a massive award, everyone knows that. How does it sit with you? I mean, were you really sort of over the moon about that? Or
it was pretty exciting. Was not something I ever had any ambition to win, not something I ever thought I would win. But yeah, when it came up, it was a pretty big deal. I think I was about 20 years of age at the time, so it was my third year of AFL footy, and all of a sudden you had a Charlie around your neck. So it all happened pretty quickly, and I guess that was a stage where you went from being a footballer to a real public piece of property. It probably hasn't been the same since.
Well, you were lucky though, because you were with a young lady that night that probably got more attention than you did.
She did, yeah.
Is that it?
I could talk about that. Well, that was probably the first instance I've had of that too, of not just. That was the real example of in the first 2 or 3 years there was Chris Judd the footballer, and that was sort of it. All of a sudden you win an award like the Brownlow, and you're sort of Chris Judd the footballer and Chris Judd the celebrity, and all of a sudden there's a good looking brunette with not much material on, and she's part of the cast as well.
And she's still part of the cast, and in fact, how do you react when the boys at Carlton call you Mr. Twiggly?
Well, to be honest, they assure me this never happens.
Really? Is that a myth? Is it another myth? Is it?
I've heard it being reported, but I'm yet to see it.
Who do you most enjoy playing against?
Yeah, probably Adam Goods is the logical one that springs to mind. We some sort of 3 or 4 games in a row where we played each other and had some really good battles. And I guess those games also coincided in pretty memorable games. So he's a name that springs to mind. I haven't had a lot of one-on-one battles with opposition attacking players, if you like. Generally, they've been sort of, taggers of various description, and after a while you gain a bit of an affection for the different taggers as well.
You don't mean affection literally there, do you? But with Goodsy though, there's another dimension to it, isn't it? If they play a very talented player like he is on you, you've got to be more mindful, do you not, about the damage he can cause going the other way? Yeah,
you do. I mean, if you're just getting tagged with a bloke put on you purely to negate your role, you don't spend much of the game thinking with a defensive mindset. You can almost spend the entire game just worrying about what you're going to do. So when you are playing on someone like Adam Goods, it definitely changes the dynamics a bit.
Who's the hardest tagger? You talked before about you enjoy the challenge of playing on Goodsy. Who's the bloke that you find most difficult to shake?
A lot of it depends on the day. Probably Robert Shirley's got a pretty good record on me. I think he got me early on in my career, and I had a good patch on him, and then he's got me late. So look, he'd be right up there.
So what of the tagger's role frustrates you most?
I guess, you know, one of the most effective